The show, former HUD Secretary Ben Carson. He's also a former surgeon. Ben, we love having you on the show. First, your reaction to the verdict in the George Floyd case.
Well, I'm not particularly surprised. We had plenty of evidence, and you'd have to be blind not to recognize that this was a murder that occurred. It probably wasn't intentionally a murder, but we all saw it, and it's pretty difficult to explain it in any other way. So, but the important thing is that it shows that our justice system does work. People don't have to take these things into their own hands. And it also, I hope people will come to recognize that Chauvin is by no means representative of policing in this country or of the justice system. And those who try to take it and make it into the norm are really taking advantage of the situation and manipulating.
You know, we hear it you loud and clear. So much of this case permeated so much of our society, from voting rights laws to monuments and statues being removed, to the fear that looting and rioting is being normalized in this country as Americans remain in shutdown restrictions in so many parts of the country and so many states here in the U.S. So when you see 220 riots turning violent, $2 billion in damages, that you hear a Black Lives Matter, one of the members of Black Lives Matter saying, we are going to continue looting. I support looting because Black people should loot every store because it would not come close to what America owes us. When you hear that rhetoric, what does this tell us of where the nation is headed?
Well, it tells us that there are groups, there are individuals who have motives that are quite nefarious. And what we need to be concentrating on is helping Americans to recognize that we are not each other's enemy, and we should not be manipulated by these individuals who absolutely want to fundamentally change America. They don't appreciate America. They try to distort the history of America. They try to erase it. And of course, your history is what gives you your identity, and your identity gives you your beliefs. So if they can erase those things and make people very blank, then you can lead them in almost any direction that you want to. We don't want that to happen in America. And it's so important that we begin to talk, that we begin to counter the argument of those who are trying to destroy our nation. We can't sit back in a corner, keep our mouths shut, and hope that nobody calls your name or tries to cancel you. You cannot be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave.
So what you're saying too is that in wiping out, so what happened here with this, what's happening over the past year is the destruction, the attempt to wipe out American history. That's what critics have been saying. The other media does not cover this. We've been covering it. The point being is that if you wipe out our history, what lessons could we have learned from our history and be mindful of going forward? Do you understand my point, right, Ben? Why, if you wipe out our history, are we wiping out the lessons of the past?
You know, smart people learn from their history. People who are not smart try to destroy their history. And just remember when ISIS was around before it was largely destroyed by the previous administration, when they would go in and conquer a place, what did they do? Tear down the statues, burn the museums, try to get rid of the history. Maybe we could learn something.
You know, Ben, you wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post this week where you were talking about what is missing in the debate about the George Floyd case and racism in America. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes. Equality and equity are two different things, and that was the point of the article. We all want equality, and obviously Dr. Martin Luther King pushed very hard for the concept of equality and judging people not on the basis of external characteristics, which they can't help, but basing them on the person's character, which they can have. And this equity thing, that everybody has to have an equal outcome, and if your outcome is not the same as this one's outcome, then obviously it's somebody's fault other than your own. That's not the American way. That's taking advantage and manipulating a situation. When you begin to give rewards to people based on the color of their skin, you begin to punish other people based on the color of their skin. Isn't that racism also? It's the same thing. Two wrongs don't make a right. What had happened in this country in the past with racism, segregation, slavery, the whole thing, horrible. No question about it. But that's in the past. We can learn from it. We need to move on. We need to recognize that we've made enormous progress. We haven't eliminated the problem completely, but we've made enormous progress. I can tell you, living, in Detroit and Boston as a youngster, I saw horrendous things, and we always had to worry about them. That's not the case anymore. And some people say, well, but if you're a black person and you're walking in a white neighborhood, everybody's going to be suspicious and they're going to call the police and everything. Really? I've never had that experience. But I can tell you, if you're a white person and you're walking in a black neighborhood, they're attracting attention too. We just need to kind of let it all die down and move on, because we're so much smarter than this. And what we have to recognize as a nation is that the only thing that can destroy us is us. We can't be destroyed by Russia or China or Iran. We can't be destroyed by North Korea, but we can clearly be destroyed by each other if we buy into it. And we, the people, are the ones who are going to have to be smart enough to figure it out. Politicians, they're pretty hopeful. But we, the people, are the ones who have to figure this out and not let them or the media manipulate us into thinking we're enemies just because we disagree with each other about something. If two people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary.
So do you think here, we're going to get to the defund the police push in a minute, because again, this case permeated so many parts of American society and have changed parts of American society. Has the political class and the media failed us?
Of course they have. First of all, the whole idea of politicians, like Waters coming in and insinuating themselves into this situation, a member of Congress coming over and insinuating
hate-filled demon. That's what she is, a hate-filled demon.
That could have
all Christians should be praying that God deals with her.
Make a lot of sense. And,
she's
we
demonic.
need to call it what it is. What I believe the politicians could do that would be helpful is encouraging people to trust the system. And, if they see something going wrong with the system, then they need to work hard to rectify it through their legislative process. But to join people who potentially are rioters on the street and encouraging them to be more aggressive, that doesn't make sense. Previously saying, if you see someone who's a member of this administration, get in their face, harass them. How is that improving the atmosphere in our country? All that does is it causes people to get into their respective corners and throw hand grenades at each other. We need maturity to actually appreciate the position that they and use it in order to improve the lives of all of us. And, I have had, personal experience with Representative Waters. Obviously, when I was the health secretary, I multiple times attempted to meet with her so we could see if there were ways that we could work together, particularly on the homelessness. Wouldn't do it. I met her in the cafeteria, wouldn't shake my hand. That was before COVID. Just pure hatred of people who don't agree with you. And we have got to become more mature than that if we're going to succeed as a nation.
Yeah. I want to recap what you just said. Maxine Waters wouldn't speak to you when you were in office, wouldn't shake your hand, just completely ignored you. We've heard about this going back to the 1992 Rodney King case, which was roundly condemned, the police activity there. But Maxine Waters was criticized even back then in 1992 for treating anybody who disagreed with her as, quote, racist. So it sounds like she hasn't changed in terms of just blanking people out and not extending a bipartisan or even a hand of equanimity to try to get to peace. Is that your feeling?
I think so, and probably, she's not going to change. She's 80 years old. But what is important is that, younger people with a lot of vitality, they need to chart out their own course. Don't be influenced by people who are filled with hate, but, learn to think a little bit about other people, about how other people have opinions, other people have rights, and don't make it your job to make their lives miserable. Maybe make it your job to convince them by talking to them and by the way you live.
Ben, before we go, we wanted to talk to you about defund the police. Many Black civil rights minority community leaders are now saying and begging for refunding the police. They want the police in their neighborhoods. Let's listen to Detroit Police Chief James Craig on Rashida Tlaib saying, get rid of all police. Watch this.
Now, I'm not supporting bad policing, not at all. We should hold bad police officers accountable. But when you have people in seats of influence, and you notice, Liz, I didn't say seats of leadership, because I cannot attach leadership to individuals like Waters or Tlaib. That's not leadership. Leadership is coming up with reasonable solutions, not knee-jerk reactions. And let's face it, Liz, we know this is really all about self-serving. This is self-serving, and they're catering to a friends group, and it's shameful. It's shameful for the people who live in these cities, who rely on policing every single day. Like I said about Rashida Tlaib, I'd be the first person to call for her resignation and throw her a going-away party. She needs to be censored.
Wow.
Do you think she should be censored?
Well, Liz, I probably would not weigh in on a situation like that, except to say that the people who are being represented need to pay very close attention to the people. You have a duty to vote in a way that actually makes sense for you, for your children, and for all the people who are coming after you. Now, do you think that it's going to be good for your children to have people making important decisions who push hatred and division, people who increase your debt to astronomical levels that your children and your grandchildren are going to have to suffer for? Think about those kinds of things. Think about what you learned as a young person in church about decency and love of your fellow man, not hatred of your fellow man, not trying to cancel your fellow man, but actually love of your fellow man, of thinking about the welfare of other people.
We hear you, and this is so much. This is so very much about not listening, but hearing people. So Tlaib, as critics have said, she is not going to her home district of Michigan to say get rid of the police there, just putting out blanket statements. And Maxine Waters is not going to her home district in California, telling people to get confrontational. In other words, it's about hearing people and what they have to say, and also accountability. Right, Ben?
Accountability is spot on. And we need to just keep pushing that message. And I say to people who are discouraged, don't get discouraged. Get active. Freedom is not free. You got to fight
Amen.
for every single
That's
thing.
right.
Dr. Ben Carson, you were terrific. Thanks for joining us. We are getting word that the family of